Good evening, everybody. It's Monday, April 26, 2021. My name is Mike Langford, and welcome back to another episode of DearBands Live, the podcast that explores the paths and stories of career-minded artists and music industry professionals. My guests tonight, learn the craft working alongside music production heavy hitters Bob Ezrin and David Bottrill. For over 20 years, he's brought creative sonics and high energy to bands and artists including the Trews, Our Lady Peace, Circa Survive, The Tea Party, and Alice Cooper. Owner and operator of Hapy Hipi in Toronto, Ontario, and most recently releasing his Moncarz Mix Masterclass. Bit of a giveaway there. Please welcome my guest tonight, record producer, recording engineer, and mixer, Brian Moncarz. Brian.
Hey, Mike. Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. Looking well.
Thank you, as are you.
Thank you.
It's been a minute.
It has been. We usually see each other in real life at conferences and festivals.
Yes, obviously, it's been a year and a half, maybe.
It has been. I think the last one may have been CMW.
Probably
bumping each other, but yeah, no. So you're still keeping up on those. I saw you were at Indie 101 last week.
I was on Saturday. Yeah, talking about music production, and it was good fun.
Good stuff. What else been up to these days?
It's been good. I'm doing a fair amount of mixing during this current lockdown in Ontario. Mixing a band called Gold Tongue from London, Ontario, which has Brent Jackson from the band The Junction,
okay.
Which interestingly enough was one of the first bands that I ever worked with. So kind of neat to circle back with him. I think we worked together in 2003, maybe for the first time.
Oh, wow.
So I was just a few years into my career, and yeah, just a great creative guy. And it's been a blast mixing new music for him. Then mixing a band from Vancouver called Jet Black Stare, which is super cool, aggressive rock. And then I was just before lockdown, I was in the studio with Julian Taylor on a band project that he's working on that I was producing. I can't really say what it is yet, but
secret project.
It's a bit of a surprise, but I think comes out in June now. But we did a song together, and it was good rock and roll. It was
awesome.
A ton of fun, and I've been taking this time to work a little bit on my own music, which is something I haven't done in 20 years.
I did not know that. Any hints to what your own music sounds like, or
yeah, so
ballpark, or
yeah, it's it's a collaboration with some of my clients. So two of the guys from Bleecker, who were Bleecker Ridge, Taylor and Cole, the brothers, and Duncan Coots from Our Lady Peace. It's just this fun project we get together. We did a song a few years ago, and we never put it out. We just did it for fun. And but this time gets you thinking, and all of us wanting to be creative, not having that necessarily having different kind of creative outlet. So we got together and wrote some more songs. I'd say it's kind of like it's hard to describe your own music, as you know, but it's like I'm heavily influenced by blues, and so it's like aggressive rock as well. So it's kind of like if Radiohead was a blues band.
Awesome.
A lot of like studio fun and programming and electronic elements, but like still an aggressive rock thing.
I just want to say, for anyone that's just listening right now, Brian is glowing a little bit. He's very excited about his own project. And I want to say too, like, as a mixer, there's times when like you want to try things with the mix, and then maybe the band doesn't go for it because it's just a little bit too. But you're like, no, this is cool. But like, I don't know. But when you're doing your own stuff, go for it. You can kind of do whatever you want.
That's the beauty of it. I mean, sometimes it's a challenge when you're mixing. I'd never really mixed my own material before,
yes.
and mixing this one song we did a few years ago it's a bit of a challenge because it's like, well, when's it finished? It's easier to mix for a client than it is almost to mix for yourself. But you can do anything, and that was the beauty. I think that's what we all felt being together, like, and writing these songs and recording, was that it was like whatever we wanted to do, we could do. We didn't really have to answer to other people. It was just like we all get along really well, and we just were all creative, and we just sort of put our minds together, and like no idea would ever get shot down. It was like, let's try everything. And it was, it would be either I'd bring a riff to the table, and, Duncan's great at taking my blues idea and like really screwing it up, and like, and putting more of an alternative spin on it. And, Taylor and Cole are melody gods. So they're just, it's for me, it's been so much fun to play guitar again. Like, just to, that's how I came up. It was like, I was a guitar player, and it kind of got put on the back burner while I focused on production and mixing. So it's been awesome.
You answered one of my questions already, because like I was always curious, because like a lot of people that get into production, there's usually an instrument in there. I didn't know you play guitar as well. I do want to circle back for 1 second, the idea of getting musicians together, imagining you're working online, like putting these songs together.
We did some of it online, some of it we did when the numbers were lower and we were able to we could get together. We went to Cole and Taylor have an awesome sort of home studio that they built in their garage in Aurelia, and it's beautiful, it's spacious. And so we were all, it was, when it was safe, we were there, and we'll return to it when it's safe again, but I don't know when that's going to be. So,
well, like the idea, like I was saying years ago, my thoughts years ago, it's like, because it's so much easier to put music out these days, the idea where you could get people from different projects and, different walks to get together, do 3 or 5 songs and put them out, and then carry on. So like hearing you do that, again, being on the production side, it's like, oh, I can just put some music out with some friends and, see what happens. And I think it's awesome. I think that's where music is progressing to. We're going to have our bands, or like our main, main things we do, but it's like, there's nothing against, an engineer, a producer, and like a drummer, and, like the booking agent being like, hey, you want to put an EP together for fun? And, it's still gonna be good. Yeah. Again, you got people like you in the band. You're in good shape.
It's all music. It all comes from the same place, and it's, for me, it's what's driven me my whole life. So kind of just it made sense. You find yourself during this time needing more of a creative outlet than ever before. So it's like, it was natural for me to like gravitate back to playing guitar. It's like, well, I've got this time at night now. It's like, I'm going to play some guitar, and instead of watching a movie or whatever. And it's been amazing. So,
no, that's one of the things too. Just like some of us like working from home, just that idea of like having that extra bit of time, because that travel time's not there, anymore. Like that's a big thing as well. And just like not trying to think of the way to word it, but just like not having our schedule, trying to book people in all the time. We need to still book the time, because you're still doing stuff online and still sessions that way. But it's just, I feel like it's freed up a lot of time to be able to do some other things.
I agree. There's definitely like, there's been some positives that I think, like, especially, I like to look at the bright side of things, and there's some positives that I'm going to walk away from this experience with, and that's definitely one is, it does cut down on the travel time. And I don't know, I feel like in some ways I could be more productive, in the way I'm scheduling my time. And, if I want to take a break for 15 minutes and go outside, like I can do it and come back a little bit recharged and instead mix. And I mean, that's okay.
Yeah, no, we could probably fill a whole hour just talking about our workflow and how it's changed. But again, you as a mixer, it's like, it's been, because I remember even thinking last year, like when everyone started recording, and like, especially when there's this huge rush of people doing covers. Yeah. Because it's like, once they realized they couldn't tour anymore, like, we need to put something out. And it's like, people just started trying to get some music together, but they might not want to put their originals because their singles went with like a radio campaign and like a record that was coming out and tour. So like, we kind of don't want to put that. And a bunch of us were talking, or just like, I feel like in the fall, a big flood of mix work's going to come up because everyone's going to record it, at home and try to make the best of it. And then they're going to get it and be like, what do we do with this now? So people like yourself, it's like, just starting to pass that work over. And it's like, I think it's been good with the amount of mixed stuff that's been around.
Yeah.
And good.
I agree. It was, last year was a busy year, like especially summer till January was a super, super busy time. But I mean, I was also back at the studio working. Like I was, we shut down for the lockdown stretch from like April to July, reopened in August. And then I've been home since January again, working from here. So, but yeah, like I would say that there's been a shift in my career anyways, from production to mixing. I'm still producing, but mixing makes up a bigger portion of my work every year, and it keeps getting more and more, down the mixing hole, which I think is, I love it. I mean, it's newer to me than production, like mixing for other clients. I in a sense, I've always mixed, projects I've produced, but now, in the last few years, mixing for other producers and bands, and it's been a blast. So I really enjoy that.
No, it's awesome to hear. And again, like when you're talking about like transition, it's like, it's good timing. Where there's more mixed stuff coming in. And it's funny you say, like last year was because I think last year was, in a weird way, was busier than some of us thought it was going to be when things started to slow down but it was almost like that slingshot effect where it was just like, there was a vacuum for a second when no one really knew what was going on. And then it just took off. And you talk about some of the upsides that are going to come from this. It's like, I think it's been great that more bands and artists have been taking that leap to record at home.
Yeah.
Because some of it can be done at home, and honestly, and I will speak for myself. Sometimes hitting, if it's Pro Tools, sometimes hitting Apple spacebar so many times, you're just like, you could probably do this. Like for what we're doing, it sounds good. You can probably do, like, it's one thing to have someone, you're getting a bit of feedback in real time, but if they want to mess around with stuff for, baseline for 2 hours, it's like, okay, well, have at it. Yeah. And show me what you got.
I've been involved in a number of sessions where it's like clients, have a home rig and they'll do some recording and send me files, and sometimes I've sat in on those sessions with Zoom and audio movers, and I've produced remotely, which has been a blast. I mean, that's pretty wild, me in my basement. And, but for me, they're like a lot of my clients, have home studios, like when I mixed Our Lady Peace, Rain has a beautiful home studio, and so they would record the beds, at a big facility, and then each member of the band has a studio. So they would just kind of, do some overdubs, and Rain would put it all together and then send it to me. And he would always, he would say, like, if you hear anything and you want me to record or add anything, just let me know. I can do it right away, because he's there in his home. So it was like, and that was, I mean, that's 2017, I think. So this sort of way of working has been kicking around forever. It's just like new to a lot of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, for bands and artists that are listening right now, it's just like, when things do get better, because they will get better, and we can start getting a room, do not forget this. Do not forget the idea that you can record some stuff at home. Some of the easier overdubs and stuff. It's like you can do that stuff at home, and it's just gonna make you that much stronger. Especially too when you can listen to your own tracking and go, no, this is what you sound like when you're doing stuff.
It was, I mean, even on the Alice Cooper record that I was just involved with, like we had to get Alice to re-record some vocals, like some lines that we had to like then match. And we had recorded it before COVID hit in a studio in Arizona, like January of 2020. And then we find ourselves in a situation where it was like, okay, well, we need him to he rewrote some of the lyrics. So he had to recut the vocal, but just those lines. And he did it from home, his like a member of his family's an engineer. So he brought over like an Apollo rig and a microphone and just recorded it. And like, turned out great. You know, I think Bob Ezrin, the producer, went back and forth with Alice a few times on like, you know, making some changes. And then I got it and just sort of had to make it sound like it fit, and it worked.
It does work.
You make it work. Make it work. Yeah.
Just want to add one more question. Moncarz Mix Masterclass.
Yeah.
What sparked that?
You know, I've always been a fan of teaching. I teach maybe I don't know if you know this, but I've taught at Ryerson University in the School of Radio and Television Arts for many years, like 20 years now. And it's just a love of mine. And then I got involved in the Pure Mix platform as a mentor. And I just kind of feel like, you know, I get asked, especially now, like you get asked, I get requests for people to intern at the studio, and it's kind of hard with my schedule and the way it works to always take on interns. But I do like to teach. I love that aspect of it. So I thought, hey, you know, why not come up with a cool concept for a 3-hour masterclass where I'll talk. You know, it's a bit technical, but mostly creative aspects of mixing and focusing on how to creatively mix faster, and, you know, talking about some workflow and gain staging and goal setting. I'm a big fan of setting goals in mixes. And so that's kind of how it came about. And
it's valuable advice for people. And that's been a big thing the last year. People wondering how to make their mixes better. Yeah. So like, and I would say too, like the value in these types of classes, these types of courses is you can kind of see over someone's shoulder and they'll kind of talk through what they're doing. Cause it's one thing to watch somebody, but it's nothing for them to kind of talk through their thought process, because I imagine when you're working, a lot of the time you just are doing stuff. And if someone was just to watch, to be like, what is going on? Yeah. Cause you did this for a bit and then you ran over to the snare for a second. And then went back, and then went back to this for a second, and you're just like, "What is going on here?" But this really hear the thought process. Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing resource for people that are in production and just curious how we get some of these sounds and how we pull these mixes together. And one of the things too, but just working efficiently, the idea of like deadlines and like bands not, because I'm sure there's that paralysis of when you're working on something and you just keep picking away at it. But like when you're pro, it's like, we need this done like in 3 days. Yeah. You know, we need this done tomorrow. We need this, like, you have to be good now. Yeah. You can't pick away at it for 2 months. No, I know. Yeah. I actually enjoy deadlines, and I'm finding these days there's very few deadlines. Like, I don't know about you, but I just find like no one's in a rush to release music. Everyone wants to release music, but there's no hard deadlines. It's not like, you know, I mean, I remember years ago when I worked with Monine, like we had a couple months to make their record, and then they were going to Australia to tour. And it was, you know, thinking about it, it's like, 2 months. We'll totally finish the record in 2 months. And then it comes down to like the last couple days, and you're like, oh my God, we have all these background vocals to do and a couple lead vocals and some guitar parts. And it was like, how do you do it? But you always get it done. It never gets left undone. And, you know, and then they went off to Australia and I edited, and it was great. But, you know, I kind of miss that. I miss that pressure. Like that, sometimes that pressure is good for creativity. You know, at least for me, I do well when there's deadlines. I do better in terms of like my creative output when there's deadlines in a way. No, the pressure is good. And even with like personal projects, it's like, write something on the calendar, put something in iCal, say like, we need this done by, because if you don't, it's another week and then a month. And then
I need to do that. I'm not good with that. I do need to do that.
Yeah, we have, even though it's our own projects, we have to be our own clients at times.
Absolutely.
No, seriously, we need this done.
Absolutely.
Segue. So, how did you get started in music production? So you said you started as a guitar player and you ended up on the other side of the glass?
Yeah, I think in one way or another, I kind of always knew. I knew that I wanted to be involved in music. It was like the one thing when I was a kid that just like consumed my life. Like as soon as I was introduced to music, I was, addicted to it. So from the time like my dad had like a really great vinyl collection, and he wasn't precious about it, and he taught me how to use the turntable when I was like 3, and so I would like spin all this music, and it just connected with me, and it was like, it was sort of like it's been a lifelong passion for me.
Who are your bands?
Always been music. I mean, back then, like the stuff my parents were listening to was like all Motown and old soul, like Sam and Dave, The Temptations, Wilson Pickett, Sam Cooke. So I kind of grew up on that. Then I sort of discovered rock music a little bit on my own. Somehow I just remember like being in grade 5 or 6 and hearing Aerosmith for the first time, and it was like, yes, like that's the shit. So I got way into the sort of classic rock thing, and then gravitated to, I had a family friend that took me to see Stevie Ray Vaughan when I was in I was in grade 9. I remember it was the Instep tour. He's playing with Jeff Beck and Jeff Healey at the Sky Dome, and that was like life changing. I mean, he was insanely good, obviously, but again, it was one of those massive connections, and it was like I came home and I sold my Ibanez RG 560 and bought a Fender Strat, and then just fell in love with blues music. So I've sort of, I went from like Motown to rock to blues, and now I'm just kind of all over. Like I just love, I love blues, I love rock, I love it all. Just good music with good musicianship, and But I think like a band like Stevie Ray Vaughan, the Black Crowes, Allman Brothers. I'm a big fan of like Southern music, one way or another. But then like hugely influenced by 90s rock. So, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, those, but that's not so far removed from kind of blues based music too, just a bit heavier, done with a twist.
Of the big 3 Seattle bands, who is there one that was like your band from that?
I'd have to go with Soundgarden. I just like I've like Chris Cornell's voice, I think was just I always say he's like the Robert Plant of our generation. I'd
agree.
He was like just next level vocally. I mean, there wasn't anything he couldn't do vocally, from the mellow stuff to the aggressive stuff, just so talented. But from a songwriting perspective, their songs were always unique and interesting. And I mean, you can kind of map out the course of the growth of the band, over the years. And it's really interesting going from more of like a metal vibe, to Down on the Upside, which is like, has like 60s psych rock influences to it, but done in a Soundgarden way. And it's like, and then Super Unknown, obviously that to me, just the way that album sounds like definitely connects with me. So.
Super Unknown, like that's one of my top 5 records. Cause I remember like coming from a drumming background, like I remember just putting that record on and just learning it and just being like, this is amazing. And I'd say too, like, I always loved the guitar work. I always loved the drum work on Soundgarden records, but it was like later on, because I never really listened to lyrics. I knew that was a great vocalist. I know that was great, but it's like, it wasn't until later on, especially when I got into like the Audio Slave stuff, where I was just I felt like I got to hear more Cornell on that, even though like you've got Rage Against the Machine behind you. Like I feel like you could hear more Cornell because like the band wanted to be like less Rage and more rock band.
Yeah, there's a lot of space.
Yeah, and just let him to do his thing over it, and just like it's so good. Like as a rock vocalist, it's like you can't say like, oh, I don't really think. No, it's rock. That is a rock vocalist. So
I'm grateful. I got to see Soundgarden back in the 90s, like on the Super Unknown tour, and then by some amazing stroke of luck, I got to see the Temple of the Dog reunion show in New York, which was that's one of the finer moments of live music I've happened to see. That was crazy cool.
Question: where did you see Soundgarden?
I saw them at the like an exhibition, like at the
Oh,
old
okay.
X. Yeah, the bill was, it was Neil Young headlining with Booker T and the MGs playing as his backing band, and then it was Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and
Oh,
Blues
okay.
Traveler. Yeah, it was like a big show. And then sadly, I never saw them again. Like I thought, I can't remember the year that was in the 90s at some point. I think Super Unknown was out or was about to come out, and Pearl Jam were touring Versus, I think, at that. So it was like kind of mid 90s or early.
That's a pretty wicked lineup, though.
Yeah, it was killer.
Yeah, because there's certain things you're like, oh, that didn't age well, but then you look at other things, you're like, that aged awesome. That was an awesome show to go see.
That was an amazing show. I find like a lot of I don't know, and maybe I'm biased because you're obviously connected to the music that you sort of came up with, and like having sort of been in high school and university in the 90s, it was like, I listened to 90s music and it still can sound kind of fresh, but there's there's certain 90s records like Super Unknown to this day, like sounds new. Like there's just something about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I miss the 90s too.
It's just, there was a lot of great music, and we might be dating ourselves, but at the same time, there's some classic records in there. And my other question, Temple of the Dog in New York, is there more story around that?
Yeah. So yeah, because it's like, it would be hard to get tickets to that. So
I imagine.
Yeah. So I did a mix for an artist named Fantastic Negrito. Fantastic Negrito's an Oakland-based blues, kind of like blues urban artist. He's won a couple Grammys for Blues Album of the Year, the Grammys in the last few years, and like really super talented guy. And they wanted to do kind of like a rock remix of a tune from, I think it was his first album it was a cover of an old blues song called In the Pines. So I did it for them, and they liked it, and I stayed in touch with his manager, and his manager just called me and was like, Brian, you're a rock guy, right? And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm a rock guy. And he's like, so, Fantastic Negrito just got offered, the opening slot on the Temple of the Dog tour, because Chris Cornell was a massive Fantastic Negrito fan. And Chris actually brought Fantastic Negrito on a solo European like acoustic tour. And so they became friends. And Fantastic Negrito's manager, remembered that I was a big rock guy and actually called me and said, hey, if you can get to New York, I'll get you into the show. So he got me one ticket, and I went, and it was like, it was crazy cool.
Just grab your coat and you're just like, all right,
I just booked a flight and went to New York for a couple days and saw this amazing show. And yeah, it was, sadly he passed away not too long after, and he sounded amazing. The band sounded great. The energy in the room was just, it was electric.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's like these songs that they never really played live all that much. And the cool thing was, they all felt like they wanted to play the record, but they didn't want to play like their other band's material. So there was no Pearl Jam, no Soundgarden, but like they couldn't fill a whole show with just the Temple of the Dog record. So they played covers.
That's
it was
pretty
like,
rad.
Yeah. So there was like Sabbath cover and Zeppelin and a bunch more. I can't remember them all, but it was great.
Well, as they say, it's more fun when you're good. So I imagine that show was super fun.
Oh my God.
Because it's just musicianship and just the vibe. I imagine on stage, they're probably just having as good a time as the crowd.
It was,
or better.
It looked to be that way. It was like, yeah, it was great. As a fan of 90s rock, it was definitely up there with the best shows I've ever seen.
That's awesome. And again, just stoked to hear you got to see Cornell. I never got to see Cornell. I never got to see Soundgarden. And that's one of those things where like after he passed away, it was like, no more will I put things off. If I see it, just go. Cause you
have to,
you don't know. You don't know with anybody, cause health can strike. And all of a sudden it's just like, whatever circumstances, even touring, it's like people can just get in an accident. And and it's like, if you want to go see these artists, if you want to go see them live, like go see them, because there's an energy that you don't get on the records when you go see someone that is like A-list musician, and in my opinion, go see them perform.
It's amazing. Like I kind of like, I joke around sometimes when it's like, when I need to like get completely inspired and rejuvenated by music, I'll just go see a show, because it's like, it reminds me why I'm doing what I do, because you get caught up in the studio life and it's a way different headspace of, you know, the way we make music versus like an actual band on a stage playing to a crowd. You know, I think the ultimate goal is to make the record sound like it was played on stage in front of an energetic crowd. But the things that we have to do to get us there is, is whatever. It's kind of like the whatever it takes attitude. But sometimes just being in a room with a band and watching them play, and the chemistry that they have and the chemistry they share with the audience, like that, every time I go to a show reminds me why I do what I do. And so it's so important to go and support live music.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was trying to find a way to word that into the intro. Because like one of my memories of you is at the Horseshoe, and you're there and glasses on and leather jacket, and you're like, and I remember just being like, Brian, like in my mind was like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, no, you're checking out bands, because they're one of the bands you're going to work with. And I'm just like, no, you should be here. You should go see what they look like and what they sound like and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm like, no, this is the right thing to do, because
I always want to
see people at his shows.
no. And like, sometimes I'd be, it's funny, because you look back now that we can't go to shows, and you kind of like, and then all the times I remember being like, oh, I'm too tired, I don't want to go, or I'm like stuck at work and I'm not making the time to go. And it's like, I'd do anything to go to a show now. And it's like, it's one of those weird, we find ourselves in a weird situation, obviously, but to me, there's nothing better than going to a live show.
You were going, big and small shows, you were still going out to see them. And I totally identify with, feeling energized when you go see shows. And my wife and I, like in the before times when we could go to shows, like if we were around, we would just buy tickets for concerts, even if we could go or not, because at least we would know if we could go.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'd always feel so like, and not that I'm not into it working on music, but it's like, I'm way more into it after you go see like an A-list band at like, Budweiser stage or Phoenix or something like that. 'Cause you're like, that's the energy. That's why we do this. And it's good. It's good to hear. But I do remember that at the Horseshoe. I was just like, the first time I was like, what are you doing here? Oh no, you should be here. Like, you're in the right now.
Well, it's funny, because like, I like to see the bands that I work with play live, because it shows me like,
you learn a lot.
You learn, right, and it shows me how far I can push them in the studio. It should just seeing how they perform and interact with themselves in the crowd. And like, a lot of times I'll go see a band play and I'll watch the crowd's reaction, because I want to see like what people are liking or what maybe they're not liking. And, you can find out a lot of information from watching an audience watch a band. So I like to go and be in the room and hear the music and see, and just hang with the artists I'm working with. It's very important.
No, I think it just last one of the last things on it is I think it means a lot to the bands as well.
It really
to
does.
Make the time to go out, because like one of the things talking to bands and about this, it's like there's may not be the most popular opinion. There's lots of people in music production that will take the money from bands, that will gladly take the budget for stuff, and they record it. And then I feel like they just kind of wave goodbye as the band's done. Look, call me again when you're ready to record again. It's like, there's so much more around that. Because there's so much, there's conversations, there's advice, there's networking. Yeah. So the idea of going and seeing the band live, I think that's a huge sign from someone in production to actually make the time to go out and see bands. And I would say, with my band, Dead Set, one of the guys from management came to the show early to meet the band and didn't leave until 2:30.
Yeah.
When we were packing up, and I was like, Bob's like, he's not a spring chicken here. It's like, Bob's been around for a long time, but he stayed to hang out with us to see what we were about, because he's a music fan.
Yeah,
He loved
exactly.
and I'm just like, that was so important, and that wasn't fake. And it's the idea of like going out to these shows and seeing the bands and like wanting to get what they're about. And as you're saying, just like you can see a lot watching a band on stage and watching the crowd reaction, and to not have that, not to say what are you recording or what are you working with, but it's like there's so many other elements where you can pull from, as you're saying, you can pull from it and go like, I get it. I get what we can do here.
Yeah.
So just props and respect for you for doing that, because like,
thank you.
We see a drop off as we get more experienced in the music industry, where people decide like, yeah, I'll see you at the show, and you're like, they're not coming.
Yeah, no, I do try. If I get invited, I try to go, and even when I'm not invited, I just like to go to shows. And I definitely, when we can go to shows again, I will be going to a lot of shows. I got to make up for this year of no shows.
While we're on the topic of shows, is there any like your favorite shows you've been to, big or small?
The favorite shows I've been to,
where you're just like, that was awesome. Like that's top 3, top 5.
There's definitely been a few. Being a huge Black Crowes fan, the first time I got to see them, which was on the Amorica tour. So that would have been 96, I guess. I saw them at Maple Leaf Gardens, and it was general admission on the floor. That was crazy cool. Just being a big fan. The first time I saw the Foo Fighters, which was at the Opera House.
Oh man.
When they opened for Mike Watt. That was a great show. Because I went with a friend of mine, and this is like, not to date myself, but it's pre-internet. So you didn't really, you didn't know, you just knew that Dave Grohl had a new band, but you didn't really know about the band. They hadn't released anything yet. So we just, we went to the show, and it just was killer. And then Eddie Vedder had this other band with his wife that opened for Mike Watt as well. And then Eddie and the Foo Fighters guys basically made up Mike Watt's backing band. So it was a rad show. That sounds like fun. Yeah. Yeah. Another one was Monine, the CD or the album release party for the album that I did with them. It was one of the craziest shows I've ever been to. Like it was at the Horseshoe. There was a lineup like around the corner to get in. It was packed, and the energy. I don't know if you've ever seen Monine live, but one of the craziest live energy bands that you could ever see. And it was like, like Kenny was like the singer, and one of the guitar players, he was like swinging off the rafters and at the Horseshoe. It was nuts. Yeah, that was very memorable. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. Yeah, no, it's yeah. There's when you can start going through the memories of some of the concerts and stuff, and you're just like, no, it's worth it. Anyone listening, get out to shows once we can get back out to shows. Get out to shows.
Yes.
Back to production. Back to that side of the glass.
Yeah.
What were some of the first projects? Because again, Bob Ezrin and David Bottrill, were some of the first bigger projects you worked on, or was some other things before that, or like how did they get into the mix? So
I graduated school. I went to radio and television arts at Ryerson University, and I had the opportunity to go work in a post-production studio. And I declined because when I was leaving the interview, the studio owner basically told me, hey, like if you take this job, just know like you'll be doing this full time. You won't have time for music anymore. And although it was like a very well paying engineering position right out of like school, I thought to myself, the only reason I got into this, like the reason why I like to engineer is because of music. So if I have to give that up, I'm not going to do it. So
not a good trade.
No. So I made the weird choice to open my own studio. So in 2000, I bought some gear, rented space and opened the studio. And I guess I was very early on. I worked with a band called Pilot, who then became Pilot Speed.
Pilot Speed. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were probably one of the first kind of bigger bands that I got to work with, and they just hired me to do some demos. They had a record label interested, and the record label wanted to hear some new songs. So the band came to me for a few days, and we just put together these songs, and that kind of led to I mean, it was very early on in my career. But those demos led me to working with a band called The Junction, which I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Brent Jackson. So the Junction are a band from Brampton, or were a band from Brampton. And we did an EP that Universal Music got excited about. And specifically a guy named Dave Porter, who used to be the VP of A&R at Universal. Great guy who's no longer in the music industry. He is a marine biologist, actually. No joke. Oh. Yeah, he's a very smart guy. And I still we message each other every once in a while. He was a really nice guy. Really gave me my first big break in the industry. But anyway, so the Junction ended up getting signed to Universal. But in the interim, when Universal was excited about the band, EMI started knocking at the door too. And because I was the producer and they didn't have a manager, and I was sort of developing the band at the time, so I ended up sort of being the guy that would meet some of the label people. And I was at the Juno Awards in Winnipeg. This must have been 2004. And I was talking to an A&R guy from EMI, and Bob Ezrin walked up to us. And so he had introduced me to Bob, and Bob and I just stood next to each other watching the show. And I was obviously, being in production, a big fan of Bob and his work. And so we talked a bit. I asked him some questions. I tried not to nerd out too much and bug him. And then the next night I saw him again at a party, and we talked more. And I just said, next time you're in Toronto, can I buy you a coffee? Love to pick your brain on a few things. And he told me, I'm going to be back in Toronto. I'm moving back to Toronto, and here's my email. Send me your phone number. And, when I settle in, I'll give you a call. And I'm like, yeah, okay.
All right.
Let's see. So, but I did, and he called, and we went for coffee, and that just started this cool, he started mentoring me, and we started working together in the studio a little bit. And then he ended up taking a job in somewhere in the US. So he left Toronto again, but before he left, he introduced me to David Bottrill, and I started doing some engineering work for David. So, long answer to your question, I was doing some production work on my own before. Then I met Bob, and then especially when I met David and I started engineering for David, then I kind of put my production career on hold and sort of focused for a few years on learning to be a better engineer, and I mean, David is, he's a scary good engineer. I mean, and an amazing teacher, and very patient. And, I learned, I'm lucky in that I've learned from two amazing, legendary producers, but they both come from different schools. And it was sort of neat to see their influence on, the way I like to work. And I've certainly lucky enough to take things from David and take things from Bob and kind of infuse it into how I was working before. And, but really they really trained me just to be the best listener I can possibly be. The one thing I remember working with David was, the way he got me to make things sound was far better than I had ever heard before. So the music coming back from the speakers was so inspiring to me. It was it's and then it's just, just learning to be that detail oriented in terms of being an engineer and listening to those sounds and making sure that they just sound as good as possible, and that was spending a few years with David in the studio. I mean, we co-owned a studio together and did a bunch of work together. That experience was amazing.
Was there any light bulb moments in particular where you're working on something and David's do this and this, and you do that and you're like, whoa, that's a massive difference?
There's a few things I remember. I mean, this is we're talking many years ago now. So
yeah.
So but I remember the first time David and I worked together was with a band called We Are the Take. kind of like a cool indie rock band.
Yep, I remember them too.
Yeah, and I remember like David was running late to the studio on the first day, and he said, like, you know, just get some mics set up the way you would. You know, he's not. It's cool, like, as detail oriented as he is, he's also very good at letting engineers, you know, do their thing under his guidance. So, you know, I set up the way I would in the room, and he listened. He showed up at the studio and listened, and he's like, "This sounds great." And then he said to me, "Have you ever thought about putting mics under the toms?" And I remember like, no, I hadn't, you know, and it's like, it seems so like now, like, you know, I still do it sometimes, and sometimes I choose not to. It just depends on the vibe of the project. But that was like, oh, when we did that and how it made the toms sound, it was like, yeah, this is super cool. But he was always, I mean, he could see that I was very open-minded to learning. So he would always just show me tricks. He was very good about, you know, passing on his knowledge, and, you know, and he was, yeah, that was an amazing relationship. I mean, he's, you know, he's still to this day a very good friend, and you know, I'm grateful for everything I learned from him.
Good teachers do want to teach. They do want to pass the knowledge and the skills along.
Yeah.
They don't hoard it and be like, no. Don't learn my secrets. It's like, no, because mess around with this. Because not to say like, maybe I'm wrong, but like, try stuff. Like, here's what I've been doing. It's been working, but like,
no, it was,
go with it.
Yeah. And then, I mean, when Bob asked me to work on the Alice Cooper record with him, you know, I hadn't worked with him in the studio for 15 years and about 15 years, I guess we figured. And that was a great experience. You know, I've been doing it for 20 years, and I still found myself learning a ton from him, you know, and it was on a different level. Because when I met him, I was so early on in my career. I was so new to the whole thing. And, you know, now I'm, you know, 20 years in, a lot more confident than I was. But it was a ton of fun. I mean, you know, really just seeing how he works now was very cool.
What's the process like working on an Alice Cooper record?
It was, well, I came into it a little late in the game. Like, so I don't even know what sparked it. Well, like, I hadn't seen Bob in a while. We would always connect like over email or, you know, on the phone a couple times a year. So I've always sort of stayed in touch with Bob, and he's always been interested in what I've been working on. And, you know, just he likes to give me advice. You know, he's just that guy to me. He's an amazing friend and mentor. So he was back in Toronto, and we went out for coffee, and I hadn't seen him in a long time, and we were talking, and then eventually just like a light bulb went off, and he's like, "Hey, like, I don't think my engineer can do these Alice Cooper like vocal sessions. You want to come to Arizona with me and do them, and be, you know, great fun to work with you again?" And I'm like, of course, like, yes, sign me up. That'd be great. And then he said, you know, and then why don't you help me mix it? Like, we'll do a co-mix on it. You know, you can help me do all the editing, and we'll mix it together. And this was before COVID. So yeah. We went so when I jumped into the project, they had already recorded the beds and a lot of overdubs. And then it was just sort of, you know, we did 3 or 4 days of vocals in Arizona with Alice, and it was awesome. I mean, Alice, Bob likes to record the vocalist in the control room. So it was like me, Alice right behind me. I mean, he could like lean over and like smack my head if he wanted. And Bob was sort of off to the side, and there was an assistant in the room with us, and we were all wearing headphones, and they would work. I mean, Bob and Alice have probably the greatest producer-client relationship I've ever seen. So 50 years of working together, I mean, the trust there on both sides, it's like, it's a cheesy thing to say, but it was like beautiful to see. Because it's like what a lot of us producers aspire to have with our clients. Like, they have that. You know, it's like whatever Bob says, Alice will listen to without question. Whatever Alice says, Bob will listen to. That's just how they work. And so it goes by very quick. You know, as an engineer, you just have to be ready, because they'll like a lot of first takes. You know, you have to be like one step ahead, because there were, it was like a lot of first takes, and you kind of comp on the fly a lot of times. So was like, Bob will say, yeah, that's good. So you fly it up to the comp track, and then you have a comp at the end. You know, we did the album there's a lot of songs on the record. I think we did like 14 songs in 3 days or something vocally. Whoa. And then we took some time off from it. Bob took stock in everything that we had recorded and everything he had recorded before I joined, and knew that there was some more instrumentation to capture, and we were going to go and do that. And then we got shut down. So, we kind of took a minute to figure out, what was going to happen. And then we just, in the end, we had to get people to record remotely. So there's some, but some of the things like we just sort of rearranged and re-edited, and they had done like a lot of different versions and takes of things. So we were able to edit it and make it flow in a way that like you would never know. I mean, it sounds like a live off the floor record because the whole vibe of it's called Detroit Stories, and Bob and Alice wanted to create kind of like a late 60s, early 70s Detroit punk rock record. So so they did actually record. The beds were all live, and and there's overdubs, but not a ton. It's pretty high energy. Like I think fans of classic Alice will love the record because in fact, there's a couple songs with Alice's original band, the surviving members of his original band on it, which is great fun. Neil, his original drummer, hung out at the studio with us when we were doing vocals on one of the days, and just an amazing guy. It was nice. And Alice too was great. I mean, such a nice guy to work with. And we connected because he's a huge fan of blues. So we were, when I first met him, he started talking to me about some blues records he liked, and we just instantly connected on it. So yeah, that was the process. It was a long process.
So many things in there I want to just ask questions of, but
sorry,
it's awesome. And people in the chat, everyone, like there's, and Don saying must have been awesome, amazing working with Alice Cooper. One thing I want to touch on is just that you're saying about that relationship between Bob Ezrin and Alice Cooper, and it's like you're right, you get that over time, you develop that relationship over time, and sometimes when you're in the studio, like there's a lot of back and forth when you're kind of figuring things out. But if you make a few records with somebody, you get to a point where you're really not talking that much when you're working because you're in your workflow. Yeah. And when people are, and you're saying when people are listening to each other, it's like when people are talking, they're either just kind of like having fun for a second, or they're really saying something with some importance to it.
Yeah.
It's not just like needless conversation, because when people, especially I find when artists, like, and I'm sure you'd find as well, when artists get in the zone, keep them there.
Yeah.
Keep them focused. And even the idea where you're saying, Alice is behind you, like, is there a monitor in front of you? Can they see Pro Tools or wherever you're using? Like, because I find with some singers, they like being able to see that.
Yeah. So, he could see it. He could see the monitor. I mean, it was a very small control room. Thinking back, it's like, he's got this, it's this amazingly cool not-for-profit organization called Solid Rock, which basically gives underprivileged teenagers the opportunity to have like free music lessons. Okay. So basically it's just an after-school program, but it's in this huge building. And so there's like guitar lessons and vocal lessons and drum lessons, like all the music stuff. Then there's like photography and writing and like screenwriting courses, and they have a studio course. So there's like a little studio in there, and that's where Alice wanted to record the vocals because he's like really comfortable. And people would he doesn't go there all the time, so like all the all these teens would come and want to take pictures with him. And it was like it was really awesome to see. I mean, talk about giving back. This was like it's a huge like warehouse type building with like, it was just unreal. So we did the vocals there in this like super small control room. And that was like the last thing before, that was the last project I worked on in the studio before we locked down. So it's like I have vivid memories because there's not that many other memories. Yeah, especially traveling to a studio. I mean, that seems so foreign to me now. But
definitely. I'll just limit my questions around this whole session here. But I do want to ask, because people recording vocals, there's this kind of like romantic element of like the vocal booth, of going and tracking your vocals there. Did you ask Bob why he wanted to track vocal, or was it Alice that wanted to track vocals in the control room?
No, it's Bob. Like I knew from working with him in the past, like he's a huge fan of like even giving a vocalist a handheld. Like back in the early 2000s when I worked with him the first time, he would give a vocalist a Beta 58 and handheld, and they would just like stand behind me and sing. And I think he just I don't necessarily know why, but just to see how he likes to work in like the fast pace, and he doesn't have to go over the talkback system, and there's more of a connection, and he's more connected with the artist. And then I think he also he enjoys the artist sometimes not even having headphones, like just hearing it from the speakers. And cranking it like we used to listen loud. Now we did with Alice. we had headphones because Alice liked singing with headphones, so we all wore headphones.
That was my other questions. I've heard, there's that trick where you can, invert speakers so that you can just like have that sweet spot in the middle. Yeah, flip the phase on. But then I always wonder, like, is it the talkback that's the issue with some producers? Because like the idea, imagine you always have to like click a button or ask someone to hit talkback on the board so you could talk to the vocalist. But just like when you're all in the same room, you just say something, and it's like the recording quality is going to be there. Like I haven't got anything. I haven't heard anything where you're just like, wow, like there's way too much bleed in this on the vocals if they know what they're doing it in the control room. So I was always just wondering, like when producers and they do the vocals in the control room, like what is it really about it that you prefer that? And I always think, like, I think it's the talkback, because you can just talk to the artist. You don't need to worry about hitting the button or anything. So I don't know if Brian froze on me. May need to put another quarter in the machine. I'll just give him a second here, see if he can hop back on. Yeah, he's hopped out. 1 second. I'm just going to go through some of the messages here. Kim Party's here saying, whoa, badass beard on Mr. Moncarz. It's the COVID lockdown beards. I've had to keep trimming mine. Just looking through the chat. Brian will be back. I know how it goes sometimes with these live streams. I see there's quite a few questions here. I'm going to try to get to questions in the last bit of the chat here. Liz is here saying Soundgarden once, Chris Cornell acoustic once, both fabulous. We were chatting about Soundgarden and Chris Cornell in particular early on in the chat, and Brian was saying that was one of his favorite bands from the 90s, from the grunge alternative era. Soundgarden was my favorite as well. I never got a chance to see Soundgarden or Chris Cornell. He was my favorite rock vocalist. It not say it took a while for Chris Cornell to really like hit home with me, because I was more into the drums and guitars and stuff, but not being able to go and see him live when so many other artists that I love, being able to see them live, it's been great. But it's one of those things, if you miss your chance, you miss your chance. Just going through. Oh, Sasha was saying Aerosmith, some metal too, Soundgarden. Brian was saying that like one of his earlier influences and getting into production. Aerosmith sounds like one of his first bands where he put the record on and was like, yeah, this is awesome. This is what I want to be doing. Most of us have some of those records too. We listen to them and we're just like, yeah, I want to figure out how we want to make some of these records and make some of these sounds. Cindy is saying, does artists give you a vision of what they want the album to sound like, or is it your responsibility to find that out? From personal experience, usually we've got some ideas of what we want the record to sound like, and I think part of choosing a producer or mixer that plays into it, because you're usually on the same page as far as the sound style that we're after. Because it really is, it's like, I'm trying to think of a way to word it. When you have people that have a certain go-to, a certain an ear for certain things, for certain genres or certain sounds, you hire people, I think, based on those. Lots of people that are very, very versatile as far as their skill set and music that they like. But there's certain people have made great records where you're just like, I like how this sounded. Can we take that, like the technical parts of that, and apply it to what we're doing? I'm just going to check my Facebook messages here. See if he's there. Sometimes with our technology getting knocked out. Brian's here in spirit right now. But yeah, usually we're hiring people based on 1 second. Internet went down. Hop back in. The lovely thing with StreamYard, if you've got the link, you can always get back in. Oh, it's down at the router. That's okay. Almost at 8 p.m. on the dot. Again, technology. I'm going to see if he can hop back in here. Been a great chat this evening with Brian Moncarz. And again, just to bring it back to the beginning, we usually see each other once or twice a year at shows or at conferences or festivals and stuff like that. So it's been nice to be able to catch up. Even the first 10, 15 minutes we're hopping on here, just checking the technical stuff. It felt like it wasn't enough time. And at the same time too, it was like, we should just get onto the show and we can just get chatting about stuff. Kim saying, must be with Rogers. Who knows? Who knows? Leanne saying, play some drums for us while I wait. Nobody actually knows that I play drums. I never seem to actually play drums on anything, especially now that we're not out touring. But all right, Brian's going to try to hop back in here. If not, then definitely have to get him back in here on a part 2. Just going through, see if there's any more questions here. Kim said, I missed early part. Did he mention at Masterclass he's doing? Yes, the Moncarz Mix Masterclass. We chatted about that briefly in the beginning. One of the things about that too, again, there's a lot of the time when we're mixing and we're working on things, we don't actually think about what we're doing. We just get doing them. So the idea with these master classes is Brian can work, but also slow down for a second and talk through what he's doing. So you get the benefit of looking over a pro's shoulder to see how they're getting the sounds that they're getting, how the mix is coming together, the way that it's coming together. But they can explain it. Because it's one thing to just watch it. It's another thing to actually have someone explaining why they're doing stuff. Because from personal experience, you have attended mix sessions. Sometimes it makes no sense what you're doing because they'll be hopping back and forth. But if you need to explain what you're doing, it's a little bit, I think it's good on your end as the mixer, but also with the client or the band or the artist to watch, just so you can kind of explain what you're doing just for the process for them. So great resource, fantastic resource these days for artists that wanted to know a bit more about mixing. And something we talked about earlier too, just this huge wave of mix projects and bands and artists recording themselves the last year. So having a little bit more knowledge, oh, got a knock at the door here. Brian.
Hey.
You're back.
That was crazy. Technology.
Maintenance.
My router went down, but it's back up and running now.
It's all good. It's all good. You're here.
Sorry. I apologize.
I just hopped onto your website. I just started reading your bio. I didn't really know what to do for a minute. I'm just joking. It's all good. I'm trying to think because I answered a couple questions here. One second.
Yeah.
One of the good questions here, Cindy was asking, does an artist give you a vision of what they want the album to sound like, or is it your responsibility to find that out?
That's a great question. I think it's a bit of both, actually. Like we, a lot of times I'll meet with the artist beforehand and we'll start talking about, maybe some of their past projects and some of the records that mutually we all love, and then try to figure out sort of a sound moving forward, or it's like a loosey-goosey term, but like a vibe for the project, how we want it to sound. And so, I mean, there's some artists I work with that have a very clear-cut vision, like this is how it has to sound, capture it to the best of your ability. And then sometimes it's me like really driving the ship and coming up with that sound.
Yeah, I was saying earlier too, like when people are like when bands and artists are hiring somebody or they're shopping around to figure out who they want to work with, usually your body of work heavily plays into it, because like they know what things can sound like the quality is going to be there, but there's the details. How someone works and how things turn out. And you're just like, no, we like this. Like, that's why. And then after that, as you're saying, like a lot of it's just, there's the vibe on the record, but there's also the vibe between, the band and the producer, band and the mixer.
Yeah.
You have
absolutely.
to the communication, because if it's like really awkward and it's like not fun.
Well, that's what I was, the one thing I was going to say before my internet rudely, crashed was that seeing that relationship between Bob and Alice is so unique, because these days I think producers and artists don't have that opportunity as much anymore, where to actually go from project to project to project for 50 years.
That's true.
Like it's just the way like popular music has gone these days. A lot of times there's like several different producers on one record, all doing a song or two, and bands, even in the rock world, are going from producer to producer. And it's not like not Bill Martin Beatles relationship, the Bob Ezrin, Alice Cooper, like it just doesn't happen so often, but that's not to say, like, I'd like to think that I've remained friendly with all the bands that I've worked with, or at least most of the bands, and I've given advice, and, even if we haven't continued our working relationship, we've definitely maintained a relationship,
I just thinking out loud with what you're saying too. It's like, there's one thing to have decades of experience working together, but maybe we could look at with social media, with Facebook and Instagram, where we can kind of get a bit of someone's personality through how their socials are.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can kind of like, you could look through a band's page and go, okay, I can kind of see their sense of humor and things that are important to them. And like, you kind of get a vibe off that. And I feel like some people feel like they know each other a lot quicker than they would in the before times real life, where like you need to actually spend FaceTime together.
Yeah.
You can just kind of, hang out online a little bit and just the lines of communication too. Cause like with some of the bands and artists, I'm just like, anyone that you want to get a hold of, you're probably 2 or 3 degrees separation away. So like, if you want to get a hold of them, you probably can. So it's kind of on you to get to open up those lines of communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just looking here. One second. Sort of loaded question. Is there any acts that you worked with that gave you so much hassle you almost quit working with them? Any difficult projects? You don't need to name any names, but I would say too, if you don't want to answer that, things that pet peeves in the studio from artists or bands where you're just like, can we not do that?
There's been a couple projects over the years, like the bands that I've worked with that are maybe like the most successful are usually the ones that are like the hardest working. So they come in, they do their work and we, it's a great experience. And that's usually not the hassle.
Wait 1 second. So you're saying successful bands, usually a common thread is they're very hardworking and professional?
Yes.
Note that.
Yes. Exactly. It's the bands that aren't necessarily taking it so seriously. Like I take my job very seriously. It doesn't matter who I'm working with. I love working with developing bands. I love working with signed bands and all the bands in between. I just like working. I love being in the studio. So if I'm the hardest working person in the studio, then that's a problem. So
yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's nothing taking away from the production side. It's just like you want artists to really want it.
Yeah.
Like they got to want it more than you do. That more than we do.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, I wouldn't. That's a tough question to answer. But there's been some funny moments in the studio where it's like, I don't know that I've ever quit a project per se. Yeah, I don't know that's how I usually try to finish, or like at least get it to the mixing stage and then say like, sorry
figure
guys.
it out. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't like to abandon shit.
That's a tough call. Cause like when you realize your schedule is like, this is not going to work, but you still want it to be in good hands. It's like, it is difficult, but yeah, no, it's a tough question. Cause you don't want to call some of these bands and artists out, but at the same time, it's like, there's some very simple things you can do to not end up on that list. So
yes. Yeah. Work hard.
We're an hour and 15 and I got 2 more questions if you got.
Okay, I have time. There's no rush.
Oh, don't say that. So I already told you it can go 2.5, 3 hours, no problem. We were talking about Alice Cooper. Is there any other artists that you've worked with where you've kind of had a moment where you're just like, this is kind of surreal. Like this is so-and-so, or like, well, that's this band, or like.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like Our Lady Peace was definitely one of those moments for me where it was, like I was obviously being a fan of 90s rock, but I was a big Our Lady Peace fan back in the day. So when I had the opportunity to do a mix for them, it was wild, like it was great. And that was definitely, that was a pretty big moment in my career. I think it was a bit of a turning point too, having worked, having done a lot of independent music and then getting to make that jump to Our Lady Peace. I first worked with them, I think in like 2014 or 2015. And, it was great.
Was it a possibly stupid question? Was it an email, phone call, just in passing? Cause like, how did the first message come through?
So it was pretty cool. Like I met Duncan, the bass player. He was developing an artist named Frankie White. She's an awesome sort of like punk rock singer, guitar player, really cool. And Frankie got me to do some work on a couple songs years ago. And I met Duncan that way. But Duncan and I have like a mutual friend, and I guess OLP was looking for like fresh blood on a mix. They had this like one standalone single that they had worked on, and so I remember getting a text from Duncan saying like, "Hey Moncarz, it's Duncan Coots from OLP. Like, would you be interested in doing a mix for us?" And I was like, I'm like, yes, of course. Sign me up. So yeah, they sent me the files and I mixed this cool song. It was at kind of a transitional period with the band, like Jeremy had left and Jason hadn't quite joined yet. And so it was like, I did the mix and I remember talking to Rain after and like, he called me and was like, man, we really dig this mix. And he's like, I don't know if we're going to release this song just yet. So he's like, hang tight and we're going to do a record and we want you to mix some of that record. So, I waited, took a while before they actually did the record, but then they called me again and said, hey, do you want to mix this record? So then I ended up getting to work on Somethingness, which was their last album, which had Drop Me in the Water on it, which, went on to do pretty well.
For any mixers listening, you finish that first mix. How long does it take you to actually hit send on it or to actually like sign off? Because again, we have we're just like, I feel really good about this, I want it to go. But sometimes we like, because again, sometimes you're just, not say we second guess it, but we're just like, am I sure? Because like sometimes you get one at bat with stuff.
You do, and with a band like Our Lady Peace, I think you get one at bat. So I knew, and I probably purposely told them that, like, I wasn't going to start when I started, just to like back time it a little bit. So I think I probably spent 2 or 3 days just tweaking it until I knew. I was like, this is the best that I can do.
Yeah.
This is the best mix that I've done and that I can do at this point in my career. And I just like leap of faith sent it out and and waited but I knew, like, I could tell that it was a good mix. I knew that I had done a good job. And I mean, I had Duncan kind of rooting for me too, which was helpful. And I know their management. And so it was, it was like really impressing the other guys. But obviously it worked because they called me again, and which was awesome. Rain made good on his comment to me of actually, like, using me on that record. So
I think the quote there, this is the best I can do, right? Because I think that for professionals, musicians, production, anybody, it's being realistic with yourself and just being like, I know this is good. I know this is, where my ability is. This is the best I can do. I can go to bed and feel good about this. Cause it's a different thing when you're like, no, this is like 90% there. And like, well, see what the band thinks or the artist thinks, and we'll kind of get it back. But when you got that one at bat, it's like, no, this has to be like done. Yeah. This has to be like, I send it, hard drive crashes. We can't go back. This is the best I can do.
Yeah. And there were very few. I remember there being not that many revisions on that one. But then it's funny because the first song they had me mix for Somethingness was like this, like, very electronic bass, not a lot of live drums. It was like a total opposite vibe. And I remember like sweating over it, thinking like, whoa, this is different. Like, it's like, and I knew some of the other songs because I had seen them play live. I saw some of the newer songs that were going to come, and I'm like, I kept thinking to myself, like, oh, why? Like, we should have started with a rock song, but they sort of trickled them in as the band had them ready. So we started with this, kind of like what was the oddball song on the record from a production standpoint. I mean, like, it still sounds like OLP, but it's a different approach. And so I had to take a different mix approach. And that was a lot more back and forth, but it was cool. You learn, like working with Rain, who has, a few years of experience over me, it's like you take those opportunities and you learn from them. It was like, great. You don't necessarily always learn from like other producers and mixers. You learn from your clients so much.
Yeah.
So, from big bands, from small bands. Well, I shouldn't say small bands because there's no such thing. I mean, the bands, they're all bands. It's just some bands have connected and become successful, and other bands are waiting to connect. And
lower profile up and coming bands.
Yes, that's the correct. Thank you. But I learn from every project I work on. I get to learn. It's the beauty of it.
Okay. I thought I had 2 questions. Okay, this is like 1.2. Tea Party.
Yes.
So I loved OLP. I loved I'm Mother Earth, but I loved Tea Party.
Yes.
Was that how was getting the call for that?
That was, again, it was. I did the OLP stuff, which led me to kind of hanging a little bit with the Coalition people and Liam at Coalition, and I became friendly. And Liam manages a band called the Proud Sons, and he got me to produce, knowing that I love like kind of classic rock and roots rock and stuff. He got me to produce some tracks for the Proud Sons, who are from Winnipeg. We had a great time. The project turned out awesome. Liam also manages the Tea Party, and so when it came time for them to mix, I think like Jeff Martin had mixed a few songs off of what would be like the last EP, and but they wanted someone to kind of step in and mix this like last song, and so Liam suggested me, and Jeff was super open-minded to it. And I remember, I got an email from Liam saying, "Hey, Brian, you want you want to mix the tea party? And it was like, again, it was like, yeah.
Yes. Send.
Oh my God. It's like totally aligned with my love of like all things classic rock. And so Jeff and I, we hopped on a phone call. He's in Australia, and me being here in just outside Toronto, it was like a really early morning phone call for me, but like late at night for him. And we got along really well. He, we just, we share a mutual love and respect of music. So I think we became like pretty tight. And I mixed the one song, they loved it. And then they said, hey, we've got these other songs on the EP. Why don't you take a stab at those too? And I ended up mixing the whole EP in the end. And then, and I guess last year mixed a couple new songs as well that they haven't come out yet, but I would imagine they do. And it started a great relationship between Jeff and I too, which was amazing. Like he actually, no one comes anymore to sit in on sessions, but he actually attended some of the mixing sessions. He had a break from a tour. They were doing a cross Canada tour. And so he came and stayed. At that time I was working out of a studio called Chalet, and he came and like rented a room and lived there for 3 days. And we mixed together, and it was great. It was good fun. We did a bit of recording together too, because he would, he'd listen and say, oh, like, I want to put this guitar part on, or I'd like this vocal part to go on. And so we just kind of like worked together, and it was great. He's so talented. Yeah. So talented. Like his voice is just insanely good. Like it's nuts. Being in a room with him while he sings is like just ridiculous.
Is it just what comes down the cable? Like that's Jeff Martin?
Yeah, you could put any microphone in front of him. So he played me the first time we met. Like he had come to Toronto. He was here for a month, and we went out for dinner. And then he was like, "Oh, I've got like sort of like his working demos of the songs that he was going to have me mix." And he's like, "Why don't you come to the car and we'll give a listen?" So I go to the car, and there was one song that he hadn't done the vocals yet. And so it was just an instrumental. And then he just started singing it while we were in the car. And it was like, it was nuts, sitting in the passenger seat, Jeff Martin to the left of me with this like great track blaring and him just like singing, going for it. And it was, oh man, I'll always remember that, because this tone is so rich and loud. Like he's just got a big, powerful voice, and all the subtleties. And, again, he's not very precious. He just gives it, you're going to get stuff, first, second, third take. Like he just knows,
Yeah, no, that's some people don't think about like the voice as an instrument, and like not everyone is not everyone is blessed or just lucky just having an instrument that has that good of tone.
Yeah.
So I remember a couple years ago, Gavin Rossdale was doing some kind of acoustic stuff at one of the conferences I was at, and just hearing him on a microphone, just through whatever conference PA, and I'm like, that's the voice. Yeah. And same thing with Jeff. It's like, when you hear him talk, you're like, no, the tone is there. And he
just has it.
And to have the talent to go with the tone, because there's some people that have great tone and just missing a bit of the talent or the hard work that goes into it to harness it. But it's just like when those two things come together, you're just like, there's some magic there. And I can imagine you're sitting in the car listening to singing against a track, and you're just like, no, like we could just,
this is good.
You could just record this.
Yeah.
And that's going to sound pretty good.
Yeah. He's, that band is so talented. All of them.
It's ridiculous.
The rhythm section is crazy. I did on the tour, the Black River tour, I was fortunate enough to see them a few times. And one of the times I like stood at the side of the stage and watched them. And he's like one of the last performers not to use in-ears. So so when you stand at the side of the stage, you actually still hear the vocal, because he's got like side fills. He calls them Texas headphones, and it's like blaringly loud. So, it was like, that's like the best seat in the house for the tea party.
No, and it's funny. We were chatting about that, I think last week, a couple weeks ago, just like how quiet some stages are because everyone's got in-ears and using, Axe effects, and like, it's just, there's not a lot happening on stage. So, you want to be at front of house, but like, if you're not wearing in-ears and you've got side fills, I like the Texas headphones thing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cause like, it can be pretty loud if you need the levels up. And Burrow, the drummer, Jeff Burrows, he's not a quiet drummer. He's a heavy hitter. So I can only imagine to get it above Burrows. Yeah.
And I mean, Jeff has like a pretty big guitar rig on stage still, like a couple matchless heads and a bassman head. So it's like, it's loud. Like the stage volume was loud.
There's some force.
Yeah. But it was so awesome to watch.
Last question, just to put it into the universe, and you being a mixer, artists, say, 2-3 artists that you just bucket list, you'd love to work with, you'd love to mix.
Oh man,
just to put it in the universe.
Okay. I mean, on any level, I would say, like, for me, Stone Temple Pilots would be one, because they're still out making music, and that's a band that I've loved, from album 1, and I continue to love them. And I just I think to hear that rhythm section, like on a Pro Tools session,
to have the tracks. Yeah.
And just like dig in, because Robert DeLeo is like my favorite rock bassist. He's such a melodic, amazing bass player. He's like, he's kind of like a modern day Paul McCartney. It's weird. I mean, it's weird to say, but if you focus on his bass lines and the way he arranges his bass playing within the rock context, it's very much like how Paul McCartney.
Interesting.
Bass, like very melodic bass player. So that to me would be super exciting. I mean, who else would I like to mix? I mean, I guess there's so many. If I could if I could go in and like get to mix a Stevie Ray Vaughan track, that would be Kim, the Black Crowes. Hey Kim. Haven't seen you in a long time. Yes, the Black Crowes.
Forever. Yeah.
The Black Crowes are she knows. The Black Crowes are my all-time favorite band.
That's your band?
That's my band. Specifically Southern Harmony and the Musical Companion, the second record. That album was just life-changing. And I would say there's not like a week that goes by since its release that I haven't listened to it. Like it's just my go-to. I don't know why. There's just something about that record that I love.
It's awesome to hear, because there's records where you hear it and you're just like, no, this is part of my routine now. Yeah. There's something here. There's something about sonically and just everything about it where you're just like,
I connect with it. So they're definitely a band that I would love to work with.
I think it's funny too, because you mentioned having the tracks up in Pro Tools. There's something about being able to dig through it as a music fan, but also when you're in the know on production, where you just like, I just want to hear what you were doing with this.
Yeah, you just you solo up a voice, you solo up the STP, soloing up the bass. That would be a big one for me, because I'd love to hear the nuances of how he plays.
Yeah. Because we have the ability to dig in and do that. Also, just sometimes you're just like, was it the mix or was it the tracking?
Right.
Because that's a thing too. And when you hear like wicked tracking and the performances, and then the Canadian way to refer to it is the hockey stick mix, where you can just push the faders up and it just sounds great. And it's just, you're always curious about that. But and it's interesting with certain musicians. You just want to hear, the nuances, as you were saying.
What you should do, everyone that's watching, and Mike, you should do this too. When we get off this call, you should go listen to Tiny Music and songs from the Vatican Gift Shop, the STP record, their third album. It's mind-blowingly awesome. Like, it's got the hits are like Big Bang Baby and Tripping on a Hole and a Paper Heart but Lady Picture Show, awesome songs, but it's a very dirty sounding record and way different than the first two, but the bass playing on that record is just ridiculous.
And this is coming from a guitar player. He wants everyone to hear the bass on this. It's a guitar player approved.
Yeah, totally.
Brian, I think this is a good place to wrap things up. I may bug you in the future for a part 2 on this. I'm sure you've got more stories
to share.
Where is anything else you want to give a shout out to or mention before we wrap things up here?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to check out some of my work, you can go to my website, Brian. That's my email. BrianMoncarz.com.
Which I love, by the way. Great email.
Yeah, my email is Brian@BrianMoncarz.com. So you can find me if you want to chat at all. And if you're interested in learning, then check out my masterclass website, MoncarzMixMasterclass.com.
Excellent. I will put the details, if you're watching the replay on YouTube, I'll put the details in the description below with the links to all of this. Thanks again to everyone that's been taking part in the chat. Any of the messages we did not get to, we'll go through after. Mainly they're on Facebook. We'll go through there and respond to them. Once again, my name is Mike Langford. This has been DearBands Live. And thanks again, our guest tonight, record producer, recording engineer, and mixer, Mr. Brian Moncarz. That's our time tonight. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you later.